Hey everybody, Jason Buff here, and we're going to have fun today with a really cool disintegration technique in Photoshop. Now, I'm sure you've seen these all over YouTube and all over the place, and they're very popular. And they were actually a lot more popular, I think, probably back in 2014. And I've seen a bunch of tutorials, and they're all pretty good. And there's some varying degrees of people have had varying degrees of success putting together a disintegration portrait like this. And I want to go through it and talk a little bit about what works, what doesn't work with this technique, and how we can create it with our own pictures. Now, one thing to remember with everything in Photoshop, your style is going to come through. So you might look at what I'm doing, and you're eventually going to take what I'm showing you here and you're going to adapt it to your own artistic sensibility or whatever. But I find that this is a really good technique to have kind of in your arsenal when you go to a client. And when you show people something like this, it's really easy to do. It just takes a little bit of time, but I'll give you an example. I just showed some people, I posted this on Facebook and mentioned that I was doing a tutorial, and people were like, oh man, that looks awesome, and it's actually a really simple technique to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by just going through this file that I have here. And whenever I'm doing a tutorial, I never, I start out with something that I've already done, and then I go back through it and show you how I did it. So basically, here's all my files. I'm just going to click through and you can start seeing it come apart, basically. Okay, so here we go. These are all our adjustment layers. Here's a layer I tried to use. I didn't really like it, so that was actually off. Here, if you watch the eyes are going to go back to the way they were. A random particle image that I put just overlaid on top of this. Here's the cracks in the face that I added just to give it a little oomph. Here is our main layer that has the particles that are over here that are an extension of the face. You can see that we've liquefied his face over here, so we'll go through that in just a second. And then here's our background image. Here's where everything started. And I put this into a folder just so I could have this image with the alpha channel, and I wasn't going to knock it out. I wasn't going to apply this to the picture. I just wanted to leave it the way it was, and I put it in a folder, and then I applied the alpha channel to the folder. Okay, so let's turn this off. I'm right clicking, and I'm going to say disable layer mask. There we go. And of course, I just put I created a alpha channel for this guy. So let's turn that off, disable layer mask. And here we go. This was the original image that I started with. Now, if you want to have this image, I'm going to send a link to it, or if I can, I'm going to just give you a copy of it in the files. But if you want it, pretty much all the images that I get come from pexels.com. So just go there. Pexels is pexels.com, and I also got another image that I got that I'm working with, and I'll also put this, or at least I'll put a link to it in the files. Okay. All right, so let's go back. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is, I guess the best thing to do is just to kind of start over. So I've already saved this. Let me save it I'm going to save as, and I'll do disintegration, Skillshare 2, just so we're working with a new file. Save. And I don't want to get rid of these. I'll keep these here, but I'm going to copy them all. I'm clicking Shift. Okay, as I click, I have Shift held down. I'm going to click the very top, and now I'm going to hit Control G. And now all of those files are in a group. Okay, and we'll just leave those there. Okay, well, we might as well go back here, and we'll get rid of this, delete layer mask. We'll get rid of this, delete layer mask. And I'm going to just start completely from the beginning, even though this really isn't a class on masking and layer doing alpha channels. I'll just do that real quick because this is a very easy image to knock out. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, and I want to mention something too. When I first did some of these images, I tried to do this particle technique on an image that was on a background, and it just didn't work. There were two things that I did. I did one image that was kind of turned to the side and had more of a, a sideways look at the person, and it didn't work because there's not, unless you start working with more 3D particles, it just doesn't look right. So you want to find an image that's somewhat flat and goes straight on. And that's the, most of the images that you'll see that have this effect are a person looking straight at you, so that when you start applying this effect, it doesn't, it doesn't look weird. It doesn't look like you need to have some sort of three-dimensional space there, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I'm just going to grab our select tool, and I'm going to just go up the side of his face. That's got pretty good. This isn't really a class on selections, so if you don't know that, then take the selections class, or take my Learn Photoshop in 1 hour class, because we go through selections. You know what? This is taking too long. We don't have time for this. I'm just going to do the magic wand tool. And I'm hitting the shift key so I get that little plus. And yeah, this is going to be much faster because this is a very large image. As you can see on the bottom, this is only the 25%. So Control Z, plus, plus. I'll just do this by hand in a second. Plus, plus, plus. Not too much. Plus. Okay, there we go. Pretty good, not bad. All right, there we go. I'm just hitting down the plus key. I can hit plus here again, plus here. Just trying to select out all this part outside. All right, okay, that's not bad. And now that we've selected the entire outside, I'm just going to hit the layer mask. Of course, everything outside is white, and everything inside is black because we did it backwards. I'm just going to hit Control I, and now we're going to have this guy. And I'm just going to quickly paint in here. I'll fix this later. I'm going to just kind of quickly, we get our flow on. Just going to paint this guy. Oops. I'm hitting Control Z whenever I just go back. You guys probably know all this stuff. If you don't know this stuff, then you might want to go to more of like a basic class, because we're going to move very fast with this, and I'm not really going to cover the basics too much. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to refine my mask. So let's go through. There we are. Okay, it did an okay job, not a great job. I'm one of these guys who's not ultra impressed with the refine mask tool. So, okay, so I'm going to go in and erase fine tool. There we go. This really has not much, doesn't have a whole lot to do with the actual effects, so I'm not too worried about showing you guys how to do a perfect selection right now. Okay, it's okay. I can fine-tune all this later. All right. Let's smooth it, feather it, contrast. Let's just play around with it 1 second. Feather. Okay, it's a little too much feathering. Too much on the feathering. We're going to do the contrast a little bit. All right, that's pretty good. No, it's not. I don't like that. I'm not happy. I don't want to. I was hoping this would be really fast and we could just blow through this part. But the thing, I'm kind of like, I get really annoyed with the hair and making sure that the hair is perfect. But I think we're kind of close. Let me see if we can get that a little better. Okay. All right, well, that's usable. I'm just going to make a little adjustment with my, just drawing directly into the layer mask here. But it'll all work. Actually, you know, the truth is, on this side, it really doesn't matter because this is all going to be disintegrated anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to, you know, this little ear part bothers me. Ooh, what the hell was that? Okay, let's just get rid of that. I don't want it to be feathered. And I don't have my tablet here, so instead of drawing, I'm just kind of clicking over and over again and just kind of drawing that out. Okay, pretty good, pretty good. All right. That'll work for us, right? Okay, so on this side, we're basically going to have the disintegration of this guy's face, right? Now, when I was drawing it on the background, when I had like the lake behind him, what I would have to do was basically clone, stamp out the background onto his face and then draw the particle onto him so it looked like it was transparent, and it never quite looked that good. So what we're going to do is, before we start doing anything with particles, we're going to make the area, basically the background over here, of where we're going to put our particles that are flying off of him. And it's very easy to do that. So I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to drag it down. Actually, the fastest way to do it is just to hit Control J. And I don't want to have that alpha channel. I'm going to do, actually the fastest way is just to drag this down to the trash can, and it's going to apply that alpha channel here. Or you can just do apply layer mask, and there we go, same thing. So here we go. Now the thing that we're going to do with this guy is we're going to make sure that all the particles that are flying off look like they're from his face and look like they're from his hair and everything. So we basically just want to extend all this across. And the best way to do that I've found is liquefy. So let's go to liquefy. There we go. Now we're just going to take this, and this is just the nudge brush. We're going to take this guy, and we're just going to drag all of this stuff out over here. Drag his face out. It's going to look a little bit bizarre. And because this is kind of a big image, it does take, sometimes I get a little bit of a lag, even though this is a pretty fast computer. So I'm just going to drag all this out. As you can see, this is going to make him look a little bizarre. Here we go. Let's drag it all. You know what I find is that whenever I'm on a PC, whenever I let the computer, what do you call it? When it restores, when it comes back after it kind of turned off, it never really runs that well. It's always a little bit slow. So that's what I think what's kind of going on here. It's just a little bit laggy, but we'll work with that. Okay, as you can see, we're just going to drag all this stuff out, and all this is going to disappear, and it's all going to be what's over the particles. And we're going to have to adjust this too. You know, one of the, if you want to talk about mistakes that I see with people trying to do this technique, is some people will just drag the face over and extend it. You know, they'll just make the face really big beside it, and then they'll start putting particles over it, and that always looks terrible. And another thing that we're going to do later, once we're doing a little bit more fine tuning, is we're going to clone stamp this and just work with it a little bit. We're going to change some of the looks on it. Like this, we might just smooth it with this or something. But for right now, let's just work with that for the sake of time. As we wait here, waiting for the liquefy results on my computer that for whatever reason is going very slow. My apologies, guys. But, you know, art takes time. Not sure why it's taking so long. Okay, here we go. Just working on it. Just working on it. Yeah. So, I've done this effect a few different times, and this last time that I did it, I really kind of made some breakthroughs that I think kind of set this apart from some of the other ones I've seen on YouTube. And I've seen about there's probably like 10 disintegration tutorials on YouTube, and they all they look good and they would pass, and they have that kind of that feel that I think everybody looks at and goes, oh yeah, that's really cool or whatever. But they're just missing something. And maybe it's just, with all my pictures, I kind of, I like to overlay stuff, and to put stuff that really kind of manipulates the picture. Okay, here we go. All right, now we have this guy. Bloop. He looks like some sort of science fiction monster. Okay, now we can start going. I mean, it's really that fast, What we need to do now is to get our brushes. And our brushes are really the most important part of this whole process. And like everything, I'm just going to show you what I would do if I was putting this together, if you were like sitting behind me and I was doing this for the first time. So I'm going to go to Google, and I did a Google search for disintegration brushes. And where I found the best brushes were on this page called Brush Easy. Now, you probably know that pretty much anything like brushes or things like that, you can just go on Google and find an example. Just write it in. You'll find hundreds of different examples. They actually had one brush here that had exactly the effect that we were trying to do, and it's kind of cheating. And by the way, all of these effects are absolutely amazing for doing effects in Photoshop, doing stuff like this. So, I really think that on a site like this, you can go through and say, hey, look at these cool brushes, and put them into your, brushes folders on Photoshop, and you really will be able to create things really quickly. Okay. So let me try again. I'm going to do search for disintegration brushes. Yeah, here's what I found. Okay, so I'll attach the brushes that I'm using, but I think I use something like this guy. So basically, all you do is download the brushes, and then you put it into your brushes folder. That's in your Adobe, wherever your Adobe Photoshop is located. There's a folder called Presets, and then the brushes, and then you just download this and then put it into your brushes folder, okay? And then when it gets there, you just go to your brushes, and you can click up here, and you can do, I already have them here, but you can go up to this guy and do load brushes, and this one is called 20 disintegration brushes. And it's, I did everything with these brushes, so if you just load those in, it'll put them right here. So let's take a look. And these are very high resolution brushes. I'm going to bring this in and just show you kind of what I do. Now, if we want to only show the particles over here, we're going to need to create a black alpha channel and then start painting white where we want the particles. So a very quick way to create a black alpha channel is to hit Alt on a PC and hit the alpha channel. And now you're going to have a black alpha channel. And now we can really kind of start. I mean, the bones, the real meat of this whole thing is done with these two different files. Okay, so I'm just going to start painting with white, and we'll see what we get. Well, that's pretty cool. It's not great. It's not perfect, but it's got the right color, kind of. I really don't like this ear color, this orange. But we can play with that. We can just go over here with a stamp tool, select with Alt over here, and we can just stamp tool that out. But that doesn't look very good. It looks very fake, that brush. So I'm going to delete that layer mask, and I'm going to put another one, Alt. And what I want to do with these brushes, so that they're not just, over and over the same thing, which looks very fake, I'm going to go up and adjust. Well, actually, let me pick a different brush, because that one looks like it kind of has an end. if you look at the end there, it doesn't look like, you know, I'd rather have a brush that's a little more rounded off at the edges. Like, let's say this one. That looks a little bit better. Okay. Now we've got that brush. We're going to go over to the brushes panel, and we're going to look at shape dynamics. And here's basically what we're, you know, every time you click it, it's going to basically be the same. So what we want to do is make it so it kind of jitters around, and you can see how that's changing over there. And I'm just going to make it so it jitters around every time you do it. And I don't want to change the size or anything, but just, okay, now let's try that. We're going to paint in white again, click. See, and every time I click, the brush is changing its angle. So it just looks a little bit more random, okay? Now, I don't want to work with this layer right now. I'm going to go ahead and work with the underlying layer. And I'm just going to, since this is already in a folder, I'm going to create an alpha channel. And I'm going to paint in, if I can get over here, I'm going to paint in black. And I'm just going to click. You don't want to drag, because if you drag, it'll look like this. Well, I changed the thing, but normally when you drag, it would just not look that good, okay? It would have like streaks. So I'm just going to click here slowly and just add some of these to the side of the guy's face. And, you know, it looks okay. It doesn't really look that great. One of the problems we're going to run into is if you look over on this side, we need to make sure that all of this area is completely disintegrated, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that brush, and I'm going to hit the the left curly brackets and make it smaller. And we're going to constantly be going back and forth and making things smaller and bigger and smaller and bigger. Okay, so let's just kind of get rid of this side of the face. And because the background is white, we don't notice it so much. We don't notice that it's just an alpha channel. If we had a background, we would really have to worry about this. And you also want to keep in mind the idea that this is coming off of his face, you know? So it wouldn't just come off flat. It would come off different pieces at a time. And I just want to kind of get rid of this. You know, we can get rid of most of this side. You don't want to have any line on the side of his face. So we'll just get rid of all that. And because we're making this, you know, we're making it in such a way that we can come back and change these things whenever we want to. And a lot of this is about adjusting too. It's about coming back, making little changes here and there. Okay, there we go. So that looks okay. We're going to come back and adjust this later. So let's put this guy back on. All right. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's okay. So what we can do here is we can also start, we can add the little, you know, we want to make sure this is white. So let's start adding smaller particles. And, you know, to be honest, a lot of these tutorials kind of stop here. You know, they're like, okay, now we're done. And it just doesn't really look that great, you know. So what I would do is I would maybe go through here and, you know, make my brush a little bigger. Curly brackets right. And try to make it so there was almost like a little bit of a wave, or there was some sort of movement to the particles. So, okay, you can see this part's coming off. There we go. Okay. It's looking all right. It's still not that great. One of the things I really like to do when I'm working with these is I like to go ahead and put some adjustment layers so I have an idea. I mean, a lot of people like to wait until the very end, and I like to go ahead and put some things, you know, that I always put. So let me go ahead and put my curves. I always really like to boost up my blues in the lower part and then drop it down in the yellows so we get this kind of look. It's kind of, I would say it's kind of my signature. I don't know if I want to, you know, say that I'm the only person that does that, but I do that to most of my images. Now, when you start doing this, I mean, I'm going to assume everybody's worked with the curves. When you, this is basically the typical S contrast. So we're just boosting the contrast. And I've already done this, so I kind of know what I like, but it did, when I first did this, it took me some time to really put it together. Okay, so there's that. I took down the saturation a little bit, so there we go. And I also boosted the contrast again over here. So this was kind of the look that I got. And now we're starting to get there. It's starting to look a little more artsy. Okay. Now, another thing that happened, and I really liked to see the eyes, both of the eyes. So I started painting in white, painting back some of his face here around his eye. So I'm going to make this smaller. And I'm just going to paint his eye back in a little bit. And another thing that you can look at while you're doing this is, his face wouldn't just go all, it would probably be separated at the different parts. So I would try to put a little bit of separation here. I'm just going to paint that in with white at his chin, just a little bit. So his chin comes out and then his neck is not, and I'm just going to let his face go back in. Okay, that's all right. We're getting there. Okay. So one thing that really brought this out was, looking at this, if you were to look at this and say, okay, what's the one thing that's really missing? Whenever you're doing something like this, I think that the eyes are so important, and we don't always think about it. But when we look at something like this, if his eyes are black like this, it's going to completely miss the opportunity to have that kind of life and that connection with people. So, sorry. I'm just going to drag this bottom image down. I'll just hit Control J on the bottom image. And I'm going to bring him all the way up to the top. Or not. Let me bring him all the way up to here. There we go. Okay, so how do we bring out his eyes and not make it look creepy? Another thing that I see a lot when people do this is, they put something in there that distracts you from the overall image. So one of the things is just making the eyes a little too perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and apply that layer mask, and then I'm going to go up to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And this is a great tool, for those of you guys that use RAW. I love the fact that you can just go in and use the settings now. So you just boost up the clarity, the vibrance, saturation. I've just done this so many millions of times. The only thing that we're looking at here are the eyes. Don't worry about all the other stuff. So exposure, going way up with it. Contrast, you can just kind of do whatever looks right to you. I don't even know what I'm doing. Okay, so let's just see. Okay, whites. Okay, so I'm just adjusting this based on looking at the eyes. Okay, so let's zoom in. I'm just hitting Control plus and minus. Okay, that looks pretty good. We can do more clarity if we want to. Really get in there. And contrast, see if that helps us which way. Okay, I like that. So I'll click OK. And of course, that's, looks insane. So let's just click a layer mask, and I'm going to paint on the eyes with, I'm going to go up to the brushes, and I'm just going to get a regular round brush, and I'm just going to paint black onto his eyes. And I'm going to paint black because we're going to invert this in a second. So Control plus, let's select the eyes. Let's just make them black. You know what? Honestly, I like to do most of my brushes. I like to have them completely soft. So you turn the hardness to 0. And I like to put my flow at least below 50. Okay, so here we go. And if you don't know, flow and opacity are basically the same thing. Flow just actually works like a brush. So if you keep clicking on it, it becomes more and more and more. Whereas opacity it doesn't add up every time you click on it. So I really like flow. I almost never use opacity. So let's select the eye. I'm basically just drawing black into the eyes. Here we go. Looks very creepy. Looks like a shark man or something. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control I. And there we go. That's pretty creepy. Okay, well, we got to remember that this is also above the adjustment layers, but I'm going to really quickly just draw black under here and over here so that we only really are selecting the eye. And I am going to put this underneath the adjustment layers. So now, check out the difference. See? Now we're kind of connecting with them, and I'm going to bring down the opacity to about 80 so it doesn't stick out. So you see that's the key, folks, that you don't want to have things that stick out and that you notice. You don't really notice the eyes there, but if I put it, put it up here, it started looking a little bit creepy. But anyway, okay, there we go. What's next? Now, one of the next things that I did was to add this little crackle element to the guy's face. So I'm going to open up, I just went over to this guy and this is a giant image. I just right clicked and did copy image and then brought it in on top. And this seems a little too, I think maybe, I don't know what's going on, but he just seems a little too saturated. So I'm going to bring down the saturation a little more. I click on that. Looks a little better to me. Okay. So let's take, I copied that cracked ground thing and I'm just going to hit Control V. There we go. And I'm going to put it on top of his face. And one thing that you're going to see, and this is something that I didn't even plan on when I was first doing this, is I'm going to overlay this onto his face. But all these little elements over here are also going to make the particles that are coming off of his face look really, more realistic and more like there's little shadows and little nuances on them. So I'm just going to put that there and click, I believe I did multiply. So there we go. There's multiply. And of course, this looks terrible the way it is. And we're going to do something here that's more, this is really what separates the teachers from the students. So this is one big thing that took me a while to learn and took me even longer to implement. But if you learn it, it's really good. So I'm going to double click on this file and I'm going to get the layer style panel. And I spent years over here and working with this, but I always ignored this guy right here. This was always just a little area that I never really understood, and I still to this day don't completely understand it. But I do know that when you've got a file like this, like a texture, that you want it to make it look like it's on top of something, whether it's like a fruit or a face or whatever. This is the way to decide how the layers interact with each other. So just watch what I'm going to do. If I start pulling this on the bottom, it changes how the layers underneath it come through. The lightest parts, it'll let the darker parts come through and whatever. Honestly, I'm being honest with you. I do this for a living. I don't totally understand this thing. But what I do understand is if you just drag these things like this, it never looks right because there's no subtlety to it. So what you have to do is click Control and, you have to click Alt and then start dragging it, and it'll be a lot more subtle how that layer interacts with the layers below it. Okay, so I'm going to click on the bottom here. All right, something just happened. What the hell just happened? Okay, that's not good. Okay, yeah, here we go. You have to click Alt. And that will really, if you can see the image back there, let me move this over. You can see how this file is now interacting with the file that's under it. It's really starting to look like it's part of it because it's the way that the files are blending. Now you can try the black here. See how that helps. But honestly, folks, I just get in here and I see what happens. And it's the same thing with blending layers. Sometimes I'll hit an overlay and I just have no idea what it's going to look like. And, and I don't feel so bad because I've talked to some people that really, are like the big deals at teaching Photoshop. And a lot of times they're like, yeah, I don't know either. Or some of my designer friends have never even touch this part. I'm like, so it doesn't make me feel that bad. So I'm going to click OK. Just look here and you can see kind of what I did. I'm just seeing how this layer interacts. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going on feel. I'm just kind of looking at what it's doing to my image. And so I'm going to click OK. And I'm actually going to click Control Shift U and make that a black and white and grayscale image. And now I'm going to go to my my alpha channel, and I'm just going to make a gradient. So that's only going to be on one side. Okay. So then I can go, just so it looks like it actually fits here a little bit better, I'm going to go with my black, and I'm just going to paint out some of these effects. Just kind of paint them out. Just try to make them look like they're part of this image. And you can go through and you can make them, you can puff them out, you can do all kinds of effects and everything, but I just wanted to have something on here that made it look like the guy's face was kind of cracking or whatever. And you can see that the black here is not coming through as well. So I'm going to go back through here to this, the layer, and I'm going to click Alt, click on the black here, and I'm going to try to get more black coming through. I think it might be here that's causing that problem, or here. But something is causing the blacks not. There we go. Okay. So there we go. All right. And I'm just going to draw black in here. Again, we're doing flow. I can bring down the flow a little more, so it just doesn't look like you're using a brush. Okay. That's pretty good. Okay. Now another thing I was doing while I was looking at this, I was like, for whatever reason, I just wanted to have like a slightly blue tint. So I picked a blue color. This was totally just a feeling kind of thing. It's just like, I feel like it needs to have a little more blue. So I put a blue layer, just a blue solid on here, and you can just go down here if you want to and do solid color. It's the same thing. And I put it on overlay, and then brought down the opacity. And just for whatever reason, I just wanted to cool it down a little bit, and I just felt it looked a little bit better like that. And there's some things about this that I actually like better than the image that I showed you guys. I actually like this a little bit better. I'm going to play around a little bit with this guy again. Let me see if I can make it. There we go. Okay. And I think you're seeing, we're pretty much getting there. All right, so okay, so now I want to talk real quick before we wrap this up. I want to talk about what kind of separates, this, which looks decent, from something that looks kind of amazing. And what you can do is you can go and start finding stock images of particles and explosions and things like that, and start compositing them into this image. And one of the images that I have, it wasn't all that great, but I just found it and I really liked it, was this guy, which was just let me just see, normal, just some particles like this. But it looks natural. It looks completely, it looks legit. So I put that in my thing. I did multiply. And for whatever reason, it just kind of added a little bit more realism. You can see that it's got the lines there. So I tried to, alpha channel out the lines and overlay that on top. So it added just a little bit more realism to it. And then I went through and I have, just a couple of stock images here. Here's another stock image I use all the time. If you took my other class, you saw it there. And it's just this, texture of kind of a messed up texture. So you can add that on top if you want to. Let's get rid of this old file. And you can do multiply and just start adding things, and you start getting different feels, different looks, but it starts looking a lot more artistic, and you're not even, that's one of the cheat things of Photoshop, is really that you can just add a texture onto stuff and all of a sudden it looks like, it looks a lot more artsy. Okay, so one thing I also do on top of all my files, me put that at 10, is I will do Shift Control Alt E, and I will make a copy on top, and sometimes I will just overlay a copy on top of everything. You can try overlay or soft light or hard light, and then just bring down the opacity again and see if that's something that you like. Overlay usually works the best, and you don't have to use it if you don't want to. I kind of like the way it was, to be honest. All right, so I think that's pretty close to what I had before. Hopefully you guys can post some of your own work in the homework section or whatever it's called, and I really look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. And if you have any questions, let me know and I'll try to answer them. You know, like I said, I've seen a bunch of different styles with this. I've seen people that just put a couple of, you know, put very few particles coming off, and people who will, you know, they come up with all different kinds of things. You know, some people that do circles coming off the side. But if you use this technique and you make sure that you don't just copy it, you know, I see some people, let me give you an example. They'll take the image like this, and then they'll, let's see, apply layer mask, and then they'll take another version of this. They'll do Control J, and they'll drag it. So let's just make this bigger, like this. And then they'll put an alpha channel and start, you know, drawing on the alpha channel with the brush. Oops. Let me see. Oops, I've got all my other files on. I mean, I think you get the picture, but, you know, basically they draw. Let me make sure I bring my flow. I'm always having trouble with my flow. And then they'll do it like this. And, you know, I guess you can get by with it, but look at these horrible, you know, here's the eye, here's everything. And I mean, I guess you could go into this guy and start clone stamping stuff out, you know, and not making it look a little bit less, you know, I mean, that kind of works. And then you can also just draw black in this section. I think you guys are probably ready to be done with this anyway, so I'm trying to wrap it up. I just wanted to mention something. Okay, so, you know, you could do that, but I mean, everybody is going to have their style, and I've taken other people's styles and adapted them to mine, you know. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful for you guys, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Also, don't forget to take a look at my Photoshop in 1 hour class and some of my other stuff. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm at, you know, I also host the Indie Film Academy. So it's Indie Film ACDMY on Twitter, and I'm also on Facebook and all over the place. All right. Thanks, guys.